Okay, thank you for being here and welcome to the Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force webinar on rental assistance and homeless prevention. We're going to have two wonderful presentations today, and then the staff here, which today will be me, are going to talk a little bit about just housing and the economy, some of the data that we currently have on where that sits, and then we're going to have a question and answer session. I imagine it'll be a pretty casual webinar today, so if you do have questions while our presenters are presenting, please feel free to put those in the chat. If not, we're happy to save those towards the end and you can go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can ask directly. I do imagine we'll have a few people join us as the webinar goes on, but really wanted to show my gratitude and appreciation for all of you who are here today. It's a really important program that is in existence right now, and we're hoping to help to spread the word about it. If anyone has any questions before we get started, again, feel free to put those in the chat. If not, I think we're going to start to jump right into things. The Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force is a partnership between Contra Costa County's EHSD, the Workforce Development Board, and the Contra Costa Economic Partnership. We've been working for about a year looking at economic recovery and some of the different pathways you might take to really supporting our community as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's been a wonderful experience, and I just wanted to show a lot of appreciation to our task force members who have met with us monthly to think about webinars and half-day convenings that would really benefit and educate our community, and to really think through our response to economic recovery here in Contra Costa County. So it's been a pleasure to work with all of you. And now I am going to hand it over to Lynn Peralta, who is with the EHSD department, which I realize is an acronym. So it stands for Employment and Human Services Department at Contra Costa County. Lynn has been kind enough to put together a presentation for us today on the California Rent Relief Program. And I'm going to run that program. Lynn, feel free to say next at any point. But if everyone could just give me a quick moment, I'm going to bring that up and we can get started. Thank you again for being here.
Great. Thank you, Lindy. And thank you for the opportunity to present today on the California Rent Relief Program. As Lindy mentioned, my name is Lynn Peralta. I'm Division Manager with the Policy and Planning Division here at EHSD. So next slide. I can jump right in. First, I'd like to give an overview of the context and chronology of recently enacted federal, state, and local policy regarding housing assistance for COVID-impacted families. As part of the federal COVID relief package known as the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, the U.S. Treasury launched the $25 billion ERAP, or Emergency Rental Assistance Program. As a result, California received about $2.7 billion in state COVID rental relief. As a result, and Contra Costa County awarded over $74 million in direct rental assistance in choosing the option A state-run program plan. Prior to the expiration of AB 3088 on January 31, Governor Newsom signed the SB 91 COVID-19 Tenant Relief Act into law, including a number of provisions in extending the statewide evictions moratorium through June 30th. The state then launched the California Rent Relief Program in March to provide emergency rental assistance to tenants and landlords impacted by the pandemic. Contra Costa County's Board of Supervisors also extended its own eviction moratorium through June 30th. Currently, applications are being accepted on the California Housing is Key website and through local partner network providers. Next slide. According to the National Equity Atlas, nationwide, the share of renters with debt is trending downward as the economy recovers, but millions continue to face arrears. Those behind on rent are overwhelmingly low-income households that have experienced job and income losses. 76% are people of color, 73% low income, 54% unemployed, and 52% have lost employment income due to the COVID pandemic. Black, Latinx, Native American, and other renters of color were disproportionately housing insecure before the pandemic, 43%, 46%, 41%, and 42% respectively. Economic insecurity is defined as having family income below 200% of poverty level, that is $53,000 for a family of 4 or $26,000 for a single individual. Next slide. In California, there were approximately 758,000 households behind on rent, and with over $3.5 billion owed in estimated total rent debt. California, Hawaii, and Oregon have the highest shares of rent burden renters, while the District of Columbia, South Dakota, and Wyoming have the lowest. Rent burden is defined as spending more than 30% of monthly income on housing. Black and Hispanic women are most likely to be rent burdened among all other race and gender groups. Next slide. Here we have the total number of renters assisted to date in Contra Costa County. According to the California Rent Relief Program data dashboard as of June 13th, we have over 4,400 total active cases with over 52 million in total funds requested. For EHSD programs, including CalWorks Housing Support Program, Home Safe, and HDAP, as well as our Season of Sharing Fund, we've assisted nearly 1,000 households with over 1.5 million in total subsidies paid. Next slide. According to the state's latest data dashboard, as of June 13th, approximately 4.9 million has been awarded in rent relief funds. An estimated 21 of 22 million of those funds meet the 65% federal obligation by September 30th. Based on the total number of cases awarded, we estimate an average of 10,457 awarded per applicant in Contra Costa County. Next slide. Our estimates of total eligible renter households is derived from the Bay Area Equity Analysis Atlas, which indicates that nearly 11,000 low-income households are at risk. As the state data indicates, there are 4,437 active cases and 1,831 applications in progress, which have been started and not yet completed. So all told, approximately 6,200 applicants. Of these, approximately 600 cases have been paid. That is about 10%, meaning that at any point in the document verification, they're any point in the document verification and quality review process. Next slide. As an overview, the focus of the state's program is to stabilize low-income households through the payment of rental arrears to landlords. In terms of eligibility, applicants' income must be at or below 80% AMI based on total household income for calendar year 2020 or monthly income at the time of application. Federal law is silent on immigration status for eligibility to apply. Next slide. For renters, there are 3 basic criteria. Anyone who has qualified for unemployment, has incurred significant costs or experienced a reduction in income or other financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic, at risk of homelessness or housing instability, and has household income not more than 80% AMI. Next slide. Currently, eligible renters can be reimbursed for 80% of past due rent between April 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2021. However, the landlord must agree to waive the remaining 20% of unpaid rent for that time. Eligible renters can also get help with future rent equal to 25% of rent due and 100% of unpaid or future utility bills. Next slide. Again, landlords who have eligible renters can apply on the state's Housing is Key website and get reimbursed for 80% of past due rent if they agree to waive 20% of remaining unpaid rent. Next slide. Included here is the list of Contra Costa local partner network providers. Among one of our largest providers is Shelter Inc. Next slide, please. Here is a snapshot of the state's website for Housing is Key and the portal to accepting online applications. It has been translated in 5 languages, including Spanish, Simplified Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Tagalog, and updated regularly. Next slide, please. In addition to the state's resources, EHSD also operates through its volunteer and emergency services, the Season of Sharing COVID Relief Fund. Since its inception at the start of the pandemic, Season of Sharing accepts applications from eligible families with children under 18, older adults 55 and over, veterans, permanent or temporarily disabled individuals, and victims of domestic violence. Next slide, please. As part of Contra Costa County's partnership efforts with the state, we've conducted a number of outreach activities locally. Over 110,000 postcards will be mailed to program participants in our workforce services programs. Over 2,000 flyers have been distributed in English and Spanish, with additional languages pending. Over 41,000 robocalls have been made to EHSD clients, and a newly launched public service announcement video will be released by State HCD on the Rent Relief Program in both English and Spanish. Next slide, please. Based on these considerations, EHSD's Policy and Planning Division recommends the following, including 1, an extension of the eviction moratorium past June 30th, and 2, removal of barriers to accessing the California Rent Relief Program. A recent Policy Link survey found that there are significant barriers to accessing and completing applications, which the state has addressed in recent updates to its Housing is Key website. Among these changes are shorter application, the acceptance of paper applications, translation into multiple languages, and greater ease of access. The state HCD will continue to refine its processes to strengthen outreach and engagement. Next slide. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Did anyone have questions they wanted to jump in with right now? If not, we will have a question and answer session at the end. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Lynn, before we, oh, Patty, go ahead.
So just to be clear, this is for rent only, right? So if somebody is making $3,000 a month, their rent is $2,000 a month, you're helping to pay their rent, but you're not really, are there programs involved in this that help the underlying cause of them not being able to pay their rent? You know, their expenses are higher than their income, whether it's helping them to find other jobs or help to pay for food or car payments, or this is just one small part of, I think.
Yes, that's correct, Patty. So this is really focused on providing direct rental assistance for arrears and prospective rent and utilities. So it's cash payments made directly to the landlord, and there are other services that are available, for food, et cetera, and human services. Season of Sharing Fund is another resource. And so this particular rent relief program, as a result of the federal funding, is specific to rent.
Thank you, Lynn. Dawn, you had a question that you put in the chat. Would you like me to ask it, or do you want to just chime in?
Let's see, or I can go ahead. Hi, Lindy. I can go ahead and ask. It was a two-part question. First, I just want to say it's a wonderful program, and this was so important because there's many people that are really struggling, and this is a very comprehensive program. So I'm really very thankful that we have that. And what I wanted to ask is, I know several people, for example, that applied right when the program came out, SB 91 in March. Their applications were deemed complete then, but they're just sitting in the queue and no payments have been made. And I was wondering if if they might accelerate that. And then the second part of the question was, I had read that the landlord relief was going to go to 100%, and maybe that was still pending now. You mentioned 80%.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Don, for mentioning that. And it has been proposed. Several weeks ago, I was on a CWDA Homeless Services Committee call, and one of the representatives from HCD, the deputy director, did announce that it had been proposed, and that it had been maybe a bit of a barrier for folks to understand the complexity of the 80-20 split and a deterrent to applying for the program. So there was a proposal for the governor to expand that to 100%, but that is still pending approval by the legislature. And then to your earlier question, I see in the chat, I did want to respond to that as well. There is a backlog. Admittedly, the state has acknowledged that they have been, this program has gotten off the ground in a very slow pace. And so as of, I believe it was last week, there was a press conference held here in Contra Costa County, named as a model county, in that there are a number of changes, as I mentioned, technological changes that have been made to the application process to really facilitate and speed up the process of approval for those payments. So I know there's been, cases that have been entered into the queue, months ago that are still pending payments. And we're also, our team, I have my colleague here, Maura Connell, we have been, analyzing the data that we receive on a weekly basis from state HCD. But given that the state is, the county is a partner we've handed over our administration of this program to the state, we're sort of, bound to that, what the state is able to do. So on our part, we are doing really local outreach activities to get the word out, the PSAs, the postcards, the robocalls, to get the word out in multiple languages to really increase the uptake of the program here.
And just, oh, thank you. That was really helpful, Lynn. And just really quickly, you also mentioned, I think 12 months covered, and then an additional months could be covered. I heard it was up to 15 months total could be covered by the rent relief. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the dates that I mentioned, or the time frame that has been the current policy. If there may be changes, that an extension to the 15 months. We're currently tracking all of the policy developments on this, including word that it is pending that the state's eviction moratorium be extended through December 31st. Assemblymember Chu has been leading those efforts in legislature, but we have not yet heard from our own state lobbyists whether that has passed. So all efforts and conversations and discussions are happening now with regards to that. It does have a bearing on the rent relief program as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Lynn. Betty had a question that she put in the chat. Betty, do you feel like that question was answered? Did you want to chime in?
What I've heard is that if people have applied through March, when they're going through their review, they'll say, well, do you have any extending, do you still owe rent after March? And then they'll pay them, put in through June, but it doesn't say that at all on the website.
Right. So my understanding is that it also, as when you apply, that you can also apply for prospective payments. For example, if you're currently unemployed and you know that you will owe your utilities bills, your rent bills, so it's beyond, as you say, through March, past March, and through June. So the program, I do believe, will run beyond December 31st, 2021 in terms of the federal timeline. Because this came through as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. So it's called ERAP 1, and there's now an ERAP 2 as a result of the American Rescue Plan. So there's a second allocation that will come into the fund. So beyond the 74 million, there's additional funds on its way. So what we're seeing, as you've seen with the eviction moratorium, is that as any cliff or deadline comes to pass, it is often extended or renewed due to the ongoing nature of the effects of the pandemic on households that have been hardest hit.
So is it correct then that there may be 15 months, and if you applied in March, but now your application is being reviewed and the person you're speaking with says, well, do you owe additional monies? You can add those additional 3 months on to make it 15 months instead of the 12 you applied for. Is that correct?
I assume that's correct, but we can verify, get back to you on the 15-month. But my understanding is yes, if you've paid, and what I did hear from HCD BCSH is that even with the changes that the legislature is proposing, that it covers, once that the changes are enacted, what folks have put into their application will continue to apply. So the coverage will apply through the entire period that the client is in need. But we'll get back to you. We'll verify the information.
Okay, thank you.
That you asked.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you for that question, Betty. Before we move on, I just wanted to ask, what about those who are seeking utility relief assistance?
Yeah, so the utilities is included as well in the rent relief program. So it is both rent and utilities, and I know we have additional programs, for example, LIHEAP, low income heat and energy assistance program. And so there are a number of other resources available in terms of how to get your utilities paid. The season of sharing as well covers utilities. So it is both.
So when an applicant fills out their application through the Housing is Key website, they'll also include whether or not they're in arrears or have debt towards the utility as well.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, so it's all one application.
Yes, correct. I also do want to acknowledge my colleague Gabriel Lemus here from DCD. Their program has been active since the fall through the CDBG funding, and that rental assistance precedes this, and so is part of the portfolio of programs that we provide here in Contra Costa County. So just want to make sure that we acknowledge DCD as well as a county partner in this, as well as H3, our health, housing, and homelessness services through Contra Costa Health.
Yeah, it's been incredible to see how collaboration has helped to bring all of our departments and partners together in this time. It's a very encouraging part of this. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. We appreciate you being here. If you don't mind staying on till the end, just in case people have some continued questions.
Great.
Are going to move on though and invite Andrea from Shelter Inc. to come forward and share with us a little bit about other homeless prevention efforts that are kind of ongoing here in Contra Costa County. Shelter Inc. is a wonderful provider here in our community who does a wide range of services, but one of them is concentrated specifically on eviction prevention and programs related to eviction prevention. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. Hi, Andrea. In the meantime, I will get your application up. Would you like to just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity of being here. My name is Andrea Foti. I'm a program director from Shelter Inc. And I'm here to talk to you about the other efforts that Shelter Inc. is currently doing towards eviction prevention. And just thank you, Lynn, for the wonderful presentation. I know you mentioned in your presentation Shelter Inc. And we are definitely one of the partners who provide technical assistance as well as doorstep services for the ERAP program. And we're also working with Gabriel and the other jurisdictions to run the CDBG-CV. So once more, coming to what Lindy was saying, it's a closed loop of all of us supporting each other, working together to improve the life of our residents for Contra Costa County. So one of the things that I'm here to talk to you about today is our eviction prevention programs. Next slide, please. So all of you probably know about Shelter Inc., but prevention is one of our core elements in our mission. We want to prevent as well as we want to work with participants that are already homeless. So I don't know if you knew, but Shelter Inc., the regional eviction prevention program, has been in existence since 1987. As you can imagine, throughout the length of time, many things have changed, funding, requirements, etc. And since 2020, we started our new COVID-19 program. Both of these go underneath our prevention umbrella of services. Next slide, please. So to speak a little bit about just the eviction prevention program that has been in existence for many, many years, we follow similar guidance from seasonal sharing that Lynn was mentioning before. We do provide a one-time assistance, but this one, let's remember, was prior to COVID-19. So we wanted applicants to prove to us what happened to them, why they needed the support, and also to be able to know that after they receive the funding for 1 month, they will be able to be self-sufficient. So there was a lot of requirements and reviewing documents to verify the eligibility. Next slide, please. Then COVID-19 happened, and we needed to be able to respond fast to the new need of our community. We took some of the things that we learned from our eviction program, we customized them to be able to provide support to those that are not going to be self-sufficient, and we don't even know when they're going to be self-sufficient at this point. So based on that, we started providing many different type of services. We received funding from foundations from many different places, and according to the funding that we received, some of them came with certain requirements. So we needed to apply those specifically. So we have been able to provide from 1 month to up to 6 months of back rent. Sometimes we are able to provide utility payments, and sometimes we have been able to provide gift cards specifically for food. We want them to show us what happens. We understand the COVID-19, but we still need some to comply with the requirements for our funders, so they show us how this whole situation happened. Next slide, please. So our eviction prevention program, as well as our COVID-19 program, are funded under government, foundation, and agency foundation efforts. And one is approximately 500,000 plus, and the other one is 6,500,000, and it's currently on hold. I know Lynn was mentioning the CDBG-CV programs. When the ERAP program, or the state program that Lynn was talking to us about, started on March 15th, the jurisdictions on sheltering met, and we decided to prioritize the funding from the state program as they were more beneficial for our residents because they were able to provide longer rent for longer time and more funding as well. So our program is currently on hold, waiting until the state finishes their program, which we don't know when that is going to happen. But we have that. So as soon as everything changes, we are able to start opening that one as soon as we can. Next slide, please. So people can still apply to us. What happens is we have gotten people that owe only 1 month of rent due to COVID-19, and going to the process of applying to the state, it may be longer, and also we want the money to be utilized for those that are more in need. So they can always give us a call at our eviction prevention hotline or visit our website. Based on the changing of fundings, our website constantly is updating to close or open some of those pages. But we're still here. We are still able to provide support to those who need it, that they just need just a little bit, not 1 year or even 15 months of support. We ask for certain requirements, certain documents. We want to learn about who they are, who is part of their family, what happened with their income, get something from the landlord, then let us know what happened, and of course, complete some type of program documents. Next slide, please. So one of the other reasons I wanted to come and talk about homeless prevention is we have programs that address our participants who are already homeless, but if we're able to support them prior to get there, we will be supporting them in a very crucial moment in their life. We will support them to gain control over their situation. We would also avoid another trauma. We know when families need to leave their residence and they need to move to living to their cars or need to go to the street or live with somebody else, that brings a lot of disruption into the family dynamic. So we believe that prevention definitely supports this on time, hopefully, the best of the opportunities. I heard one of the questions, I think Patty was from you before, if there's a way to support participants going through any crisis with looking at their budgets, analyzing what are they spending their money on, supporting them to apply for different jobs. When they come to Shelter Inc., we're able to provide those services. We are able to talk to them about their budgets, and we have analyzed, I've seen, for example, very high car payments that are 500, 600 for somebody who's really not able to afford that. So we have a conversation with them of what steps they can take on that. If they want to improve their income, we have employment specialist services where they can also work with, where they can even teach them how to create a resume, how to dress for success. They can practice mock-in interview and different resources like that, where we can support them in a more rounded way to improve their current situation. Next question, please. Next. And I think that's basically who we are and what we do. And one of the things that I also wanted to talk to all of you about is the connection between sheltering and 211. So 211 is one of the first, if you give us a call to the 1038 phone number, one of our property specialists would always refer you to 211. And the reason why is not only because of housing support, but you may need something else. You may need some food, you may need some clothing, you may need any other type of resource. And we always utilize 211 for that. We constantly have meetings and conversations with staff members from 211 where we update our programs so they're able to provide the right information to the callers. We also know that sometimes we go back and forward. They call 211, call sheltering, call 211, call sheltering. So we're trying to kind of streamline processes and procedures as we go, but they're definitely a key partner in everything that we do.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was really informative and helpful. I just wanted to start off the question and answer session by asking, do you feel like the fund that existed prior to COVID-19 was able to cover the amount of requests that you were seeing at Shelter Inc? Or did you feel like there was more need than there were funds available?
More need than there were funds available. And this is prior to COVID-19. Prior to COVID-19, we were able to provide services from 600 to up to 800, 900 people, just only with eviction prevention services. Right now, we're almost doubling that up because of COVID-19. Some of the funds that we have received in the past, they're very limited in terms of they want to serve families with children, which is wonderful. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all need to serve our families with children. But we were always in a hard situation when somebody who was single or couples without children came to request support from us, because not a lot of the funders were able to provide services for them. And we have also partnered with Season of Sharing in the past, Catholic Charities as well, St. Vincent de Paul, which they also have a smaller prevention programs in the county. So what we have done is we have one participant and we talk and say like, okay, Sheltering can pay for Lindy January, and then Season of Sharing can pay February, and then the other will pay April, and the other one. So we're able to kind of leverage the services that we have in the county, as well as leverage the funding that we have internally as an agency. Because when we are able to do it, we mix and match funds, meaning if we're able to provide you funding for more than 1 month, utilizing different foundations, we will do it. So we're always trying to see how can we be more creative and definitely support the participants, of course, in compliance with everything that is requested from us.
That's great to hear. Does anyone else have any questions for Andrea before we move forward? I have one more, but I want to make sure that none of our participants have questions, and I'm not seeing any. Okay, my last question was just about data and information that you're able to take in. I mean, first and foremost, the sheltering services provided throughout the county. And if so, are you guys able to track kind of where those requests come from so that you have a sense of kind of what the evolving situation is here in Contra Costa County? And if so, if people were interested in that data, is that something you will share?
Absolutely. We utilize HMIS system for all of our data. Even though it is prevention, we have all the information in there. We track all of the main points that HUD is asking us to report back to them. So some of this information it can be very general in terms of demographics, age, income level, number of people per household. And it can vary according to the years. I know that, for example, 2019 was a slower year in comparison with 2018. We were able to serve 700 instead of 900 the prior year. And then 2020 happened, and then the numbers went up again. So it changes according to what is going on currently in our day-to-day lives. We've seen, like you mentioned, we definitely serve Contra Costa wide, and we get participants applying from any region of the county. Very rare we get participants from the Alamo, Denville area, but different than that, we get participants from all over the place. They know where we are, what type of work we do. They give us a call, and we do the best that we can to support them.
Thank you. And would you mind just clarifying for the group what HMIS is?
Oh yes, the Homeless Management
Information System.
Information System, thank you. It's a database where we actually have to report everything that we do with our homeless participants. We utilize a database agency-wide, and I know that some of the other places that actually have prevention services do not use this specific database. We have decided to use it since many years ago as a way to support us with data keep track of our efforts, see the impact of our programs, and we also have many reports to do. So that can also help us with that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. If anyone has a question for her, she's going to stick around with us for the rest of our webinar. So feel free to put those in the chat. Hopefully we have a little bit more of a sense of some of the homeless prevention efforts that exist here in Contra Costa County, specifically through Shelter Inc. We wanted to end this webinar by just talking a little bit about the numbers and what we do know about housing here in Contra Costa County right now and today, or at least in the last few years. So if you give me 1 minute, I'm going to just bring up a presentation. So, sorry, everyone. Oh, there we go. Hopefully you're seeing that. We just wanted to talk a little bit about equitable economic recovery and how that ties into housing and how housing ties into equitable economic recovery. So some of these numbers will probably be familiar to some of you, but hopefully some of it is new information as well. First and foremost, we know we've been dealing with a housing crisis here in California for some time. It's only been exacerbated in the last year and a half. Certainly, I imagine many of you have seen the articles that have come out about really high and luxury end rental units, providing all kinds of interesting incentives to get people to come and live there. But for the most part, our general housing and rental market has continued to be pretty affordably challenged. And I just wanted to show some of the headlines that we've seen within the last 3 or 4 months, just really highlighting that the housing crisis is getting worse. We're certainly, I think, seeing that talked about a lot in the home buying market, but it's also true in many ways in the rental market. So this is a little look at home values in Contra Costa County. The median listing for a home if you're going to buy is $750,000. I imagine that number has gone up in the last month. And the average rent in Richmond is about $2,500. The average rent in Antioch is about $1,800. And in Concord, as you can see, if you were looking for a rental above if you're looking for a rental below $1,500, but in the $1,000 to $1,500 range, there's about 2% of the market that could serve you. And when we're talking about low vacancy rates, that means that there's possibly even less of a market share for you. I also just wanted to mention that while the median listing price here is $750,000, the median home price that it's actually sold for is almost $100,000 higher. It's also important to say that anytime you're talking about averages and medians, you're talking about a wide range of different pricing, which does suggest that in some of these areas, there's probably rents that are much lower, much higher, depending on where you are in that city. So, of course, the universal question, can tenants afford rent? Now, we didn't have this specifically for cities in Contra Costa County, but I did still think that this was helpful data in just the general San Francisco Bay Area, and especially because it compares it to other areas throughout the state, including Chico and Fresno, where still it'd be quite a challenge to be able to pay for your rent, especially if we're using that kind of 33 or less is the amount of your paycheck we'd like to see going towards rent or housing. In San Francisco, rent is on average $2,900, which is actually less than many of us have probably heard. We all know that there's been some incredibly high rents in the San Francisco and San Francisco Bay Area. But you need to work about 140 hours a week to be able to pay for that. We're basing this off of current minimum wage. So the vacancy rate in Contra Costa County is around 4%. This does fluctuate a little bit year over year, but it's not a very high vacancy rate. In fact, it's about a whole percentage point below the national average. And I just wanted to mention that HUD does track this information, so we are able to see how that changes over the years. And they have specifically highlighted the Oakland housing market area as an example of places where there is strong economic growth, but a tight housing market makes it so that the economic growth is not always reflected in people's spending ability or spending power. As many of us have heard over the last year or two, especially as there's been an increased concentration on this, most of our low-income families, if not all of our low-income families in the San Francisco Bay Area, are dealing with rent burden in one way or another. So Lynn was kind enough to mention the Equity Atlas. We have a lot of great data that comes both out of national policy link work and local policy link work. But these were two that I wanted to really highlight, that the rent burden has risen dramatically in the Bay Area region, and that about half of Bay Area renters are rent burden. As I said, those are those who we know are experiencing rent burden directly. Many are experiencing it possibly indirectly in that they are coming up with their ability to pay their rent in other ways. Low income, Black, Latinx, Native Americans, and female renters are more likely to be rent burdened. It's important to mention because we know this is an equity issue and the Equity Atlas is specifically looking at that. As such, I wanted to just kind of include this graphic of Concord renters. It's in 2016, so it is a little bit dated, but it's such a local data that I thought it was still important and helpful to share. And it really does kind of show some of the disproportionate issues that exist around home ownership versus renter. This is something that the state has been talking a lot about. We've specifically seen some conversations around Black and African American family home ownership and trying to increase that here in the state of California. So ongoing conversations, and certainly something that the reparations task force that was set up last year is specifically talking about and looking at. The last thing I wanted to just mention, and I think partially because this illustration just does such a great job, is that in Concord, again, this data is from 2016, but in Concord, the majority of people, 54% of Concord's renters could not afford the median rent in any neighborhood in Concord. And this really illustrates that the majority of Concord would require you to have an income between $75,000 and $99,000. Just not necessarily easy to come by, especially if you're, somewhat new or young in the job market. So I think that those are some good graphics and some good information to just kind of paint the rental situation and tenant situation for many in our community. It also helps to illustrate the importance of building more housing, which is something that we've talked about a lot at the Contra Costa Economic Partnership, as well as at the East Bay Leadership Council, just recognizing that part of this problem is that there's just not enough supply. HUD put out a report a few years ago that found that there was between 3,000 and 4,000 units in the process of being built, but about 19,000 that were going to be needed in the next 3 years. So we know this is not a small issue and certainly not an easy one. And I appreciate all of those who've been continually working at trying to tackle it and thinking about different policies that could help the problem both in the short term and in the long term. If anyone's interested in engaging in that work with us, we certainly welcome that. We'd love to talk more with you about what we've been doing at the East Bay Leadership Council and at the Contra Costa Economic Partnership. And I appreciate Lynn including some of the policy recommendations that Contra Costa County has specifically been looking at. Okay, well, that was our short presentation. Does anyone have any questions for Lynn, Andrea, or I? Before we kind of wrap up this webinar, I wanted to open it back up and see if anyone had questions or comments. Okay, I'm not hearing any. I did want to thank Lynn and Andrea for doing a wonderful presentation today. I think it was really informative. If anyone wants their presentations, happy to share them. Feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to send those forward. Thank you again for joining us. We are going to be doing a second housing-based webinar as part of our Equitable Economic Recovery work, looking specifically at land trusts and housing trusts and what role they might play in the housing crisis solution. If it's something you're interested in, we're specifically going to be highlighting a program here in Contra Costa County called Richmond Land, which is a community land trust in Richmond, looking at West County community land trust efforts and work. So I'm really excited to hear from them. It's a very local effort, but the land trust and housing trust effort is present throughout the Bay Area, and we'll also be talking about what that looks like. So I hope that you'll be able to join us next Wednesday, June 23rd at 10. If anyone would like information about that, again, feel free to email me. If not, pay attention. We'll be sending out lots of notifications of it in the next month or so. I'm sorry, the next week or so. Thank you again. And thank you, Mark, for putting that in the chat. If you'd like to register for that event on June 23rd, Mark has put the information in the chat. So thank you again to our Equitable Economic Recovery Task Force members who joined us today and all of the community members who came to sit in. And thank you to Andrea and Lynn. We really appreciate you being here. Hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.